"Step back, sir. You're not cleared." Those were the first words I said to the man who would later become the reason I questioned everything I thought I knew about doing my job. At the time, I didn't know his name. I didn't know his position. I didn't know that while I was standing there protecting a locked gate, he had spent the entire night protecting a mission that thousands of people were waiting to see succeed. All I knew was one thing. His name wasn't on my list. And when you're the person responsible for security at a restricted launch site, sometimes one missing name is the only thing that matters. My name is Evan Mercer, and before that morning, I thought I understood exactly what my job required. A clear badge, a matching credential, a name on the approved access list. No exceptions, no shortcuts. No, trust me, I'm supposed to be here, because, in my line of work, the person who ignores a small warning sign is usually the person everyone remembers when something goes wrong. That launch morning started like every other high-pressure day at the Coastal Atlantic Space Center. The kind of morning where everyone speaks a little quieter because everyone knows something important is about to happen. The sky was still almost completely dark. The Florida humidity wrapped around you before the sun even came up, and the air had that strange feeling it gets before a major event, like the whole place was holding its breath. Around 70 people were gathered behind the security barrier inside the restricted viewing platform. Engineers, officials, invited guests, and mission personnel all waiting for the final countdown. Everyone had somewhere they needed to be. Everyone had a reason for being there, and everyone had the paperwork to prove it. Then I saw him walking toward the gate, alone. No group around him, no assistant, no one announcing his arrival. Just a man carrying a coffee cup in one hand and an old backpack over his shoulder. He wore a simple navy blue shirt and faded jeans. His badge was clipped to the strap of his backpack, but it was turned around, showing only the blank backside. I remember thinking, that's exactly the kind of thing that gets my attention. Not because he looked suspicious. Actually, he looked like someone who hadn't slept much. But because every little detail mattered that morning. I watched him approach and held out my hand. "Badge, please." He turned it over, and I checked it. Then I checked the printed access sheet attached to my clipboard. Once, twice. I even moved my finger down the list slowly because I thought maybe I had skipped a line. But his name wasn't there. I looked back at him. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step aside for a moment." He didn't react the way most people did. Usually, when someone was stopped at a restricted area, they immediately started explaining. They got defensive. They said things like, "Do you know who I am?" or "Call my supervisor." But this man just looked at me calmly. He took another sip from his coffee and nodded. "There was a last-minute system issue," he said. "My confirmation came through late. I should be on the inside?" His voice wasn't demanding. It wasn't arrogant. It was almost too calm. And strangely enough, that made me more careful, because confidence can come from two very different places. Sometimes it's because someone knows they belong. Other times it's because someone is used to getting their way. My job was not to guess which one it was. My job was to verify. "I understand," I told him, "but a late confirmation still needs to go through the proper process." He looked toward the launch area for a moment, then back at me. "I understand." That was all he said. No argument. No frustration. He simply stepped to the side and waited. And that's when I noticed someone else watching the situation. About 6 feet away stood Victor Lang. He was exactly the kind of person who looked like he belonged in that environment. Perfectly pressed button-down shirt, official badge hanging straight from his neck, expensive watch, confident posture. The kind of person who never seemed rushed because he always expected doors to open for him. Victor glanced at his watch, then looked at the man standing outside the gate, then looked at me. He didn't say anything, but that silence felt like a message. He wanted to see what I would do. Let the man through, and maybe I was breaking protocol. Keep him out, and maybe I was making a mistake. Either way, I was the person standing at the gate. I looked across the platform and saw my supervisor watching from a distance. He wasn't stepping in. He wasn't giving me an answer. He was letting me make the call. And honestly, that was the moment when the pressure really hit me. Because rules are easy when everyone agrees with them. The difficult moments come when someone standing right in front of you asks you to bend them. The countdown continued. 20 minutes, 19 minutes, 18 minutes. The man with the coffee remained exactly where he was. He adjusted his backpack strap, looked toward the launch pad, and waited. No anger, no complaints, no attempt to use his importance to get around me. I remember thinking, who is this guy? Because most people who were important wanted you to know it. They wanted the room to change when they walked in. But this man seemed completely comfortable being invisible. Then the large screen above the platform suddenly changed. The countdown display disappeared and switched to a mission personnel overview. Names began appearing across the screen. Department names, project roles, engineering assignments. At first, I barely paid attention. I was still focused on the gate, still focused on the paperwork in my hand, still focused on doing what I thought was right. Then I heard someone behind me whisper, "Wait, that's him." I looked up, and there it was. At the top of the engineering section, the name that stopped everything, the name of the man standing outside my gate, Marcus Ellison, lead propulsion engineer. For a few seconds, nobody moved. It was strange how quickly a room full of confident people could become completely silent. A few minutes earlier, that man had been just another person standing in the wrong place at the wrong time. Now everyone was looking at him differently. I watched people turn their heads from the screen back toward the gate, almost like they were trying to connect two completely different images in their minds. A tired guy holding a coffee cup and wearing an old backpack was suddenly the person whose decisions could determine whether a billion-dollar mission succeeded or failed. And the worst part for me was realizing that I had been the one standing between him and the place he needed to be. His name was Marcus Ellison, not a name I knew that morning, but one I would never forget. I looked back down at my access sheet, almost hoping there was some explanation hidden in the paperwork. Maybe I had the wrong page. Maybe the system had updated and nobody told me. Maybe there was some technical reason that made this whole situation less embarrassing. But there wasn't. The list was outdated. The mistake was mine. Marcus was still standing there, and he still wasn't angry. That was the part that bothered me the most. If he had yelled, I could have defended myself. If he had insulted me, I could have told myself he was arrogant, but he didn't. He just waited, and somehow that made me feel even worse. Then I saw Victor Lang move. The same man who had been standing nearby watching everything unfold suddenly took 2 quiet steps away. He turned his attention toward the opposite side of the platform like there was something fascinating happening over there. There wasn't. Everyone knew it. He wasn't interested in the launch equipment. He was interested in avoiding the moment. I never found out exactly what Victor was thinking, and maybe I never will, but I learned something that day. Sometimes the loudest statement a person makes is the moment they choose to disappear. Before I could say anything, a woman in a gray mission jacket walked across the platform. Her name was Dr. Elaine Porter. She had spent over 20 years working on aerospace systems, and people in that building listened when she spoke. She didn't rush. She didn't make a scene. She simply walked to the gate, looked at my paperwork, then looked at Marcus standing outside. "You know, the person who signed off on the propulsion pressure review at 2047 this morning probably shouldn't be waiting outside with 14 minutes left," she said calmly. There was no anger in her voice. Somehow, that made it hit harder. She wasn't attacking me. She was stating a fact I couldn't ignore. She looked at Marcus and gave a small nod. "Marcus, they're ready for you." Then she turned around and walked back toward the platform. She didn't embarrass me. She didn't need to. The truth had already done that. I unlocked the gate and stepped aside. "Mr. Ellison, I'm sorry. Please come through." He looked at me for a moment, not with anger, not with disappointment, just with a tired kind of understanding. "You were doing your job," he said. 4 words. That's all he gave me. And somehow those 4 words stayed with me longer than any criticism ever could. But opening the gate wasn't enough. I felt like I owed him more than just access. So I walked him through the crowd myself. I made sure he had a clear path. I took him to the front viewing position, the one with the cleanest line of sight to the launch pad. Then I stayed behind him, not because anyone told me to, not because it was part of my assignment. I stayed because I wanted to make sure nobody else looked at that man and decided he didn't belong. For the next 14 minutes, I watched the person everyone had underestimated stand quietly and watch the machine he helped create prepare to leave the ground. The funny thing is, Marcus never acted like a celebrity. He didn't wave to people. He didn't explain who he was. He didn't say, "You should know my name." He just watched. Like this wasn't about recognition. It was about seeing something he had spent years building finally do what it was designed to do. After the launch, when the smoke cleared and everyone started celebrating, I found myself thinking about the moment at the gate. I kept replaying it over and over. The way I looked at him, the way I judged the situation. The way I assumed the person in front of me was trying to get around the rules instead of wondering if the system had failed him. Later that afternoon, I filed my incident report. I could have written around the truth. I could have blamed the outdated list, the software delay, the communication breakdown, and to be fair, all those things played a part. But at the end of the day, I was the person who made the decision. So I wrote it clearly. Access denial was caused by my incorrect assessment of the situation and reliance on outdated information. I signed my name underneath. My performance review was only 3 weeks away. I knew there was a chance this could hurt me. I knew someone could look at it and say I failed. But something inside me said the only way to fix a mistake was to own it completely. A few days later, I finally learned the full story of what happened before Marcus arrived at the gate. He hadn't been late because he forgot his credentials. He hadn't been careless. He had been inside the engineering building since 2 in the morning because one of the propulsion pressure systems had started showing unusual readings, the kind of problem that doesn't look dramatic from the outside but can turn into a serious issue if the right person doesn't catch it. While everyone else was preparing for the launch event, Marcus was sitting in a room surrounded by engineers, reviewing numbers, running simulations, and refusing to leave until he knew the system was safe. The coffee cup I saw in his hand wasn't his first. It was his third. The backpack wasn't filled with random things. It carried the notes and equipment he had been using all night, and the badge I thought looked suspicious. It was flipped because he had been moving between buildings, checking systems, and working instead of standing in front of a mirror, making sure it looked perfect. That was the moment I understood something I wish I had understood earlier. Important people don't always look important. Sometimes they look exhausted. Sometimes they look ordinary. Sometimes they are the person standing quietly outside the door, while everyone else is waiting for the person who will eventually walk through it. 3 weeks later, I walked into my performance review expecting the kind of conversation nobody wants to have. I had replayed that morning in my head so many times that I knew every detail by heart. The way Marcus adjusted his backpack strap, the way he looked at the launch pad instead of looking at me, the way I held that printed list like it was the only thing that mattered in the world. I kept asking myself the same question over and over again. If I had just taken 1 more minute to listen, would everything have been different? I walked into that room carrying the weight of that decision, and honestly, I was prepared to accept whatever came next. I thought maybe I had damaged my reputation. Maybe my supervisor would see me as someone who couldn't handle pressure. Maybe the lesson would simply be that I wasn't ready for a responsibility like that. But when my supervisor closed the door and placed my incident report on the table, he didn't look angry. He looked thoughtful. He tapped the paper with his finger and said, "Do you know what most people do when they make a mistake?" I stayed quiet. They explain why it wasn't really their fault. He looked down at the report again. "You didn't do that. I didn't suddenly become a hero because I admitted I was wrong. I still made the wrong call. I still kept someone outside who should have been inside. The system failed. Communication failed. The list was outdated. But when all those excuses were removed, there was still one person standing at that gate making a final decision. Me. And I think that's something a lot of people struggle with. We like being responsible when things go right. We like saying, "I made that happen." But when something goes wrong, suddenly there are 10 other reasons why it wasn't our fault. That morning taught me that accountability isn't about punishing yourself forever. It's about having enough honesty to look at a situation and say, "I could have done better." After that day, I changed the way I approached my job. I still checked every badge. I still followed every security procedure. I didn't become careless because I felt bad. In fact, I became more careful than ever. But I also started asking different questions. Instead of only asking, "Does this person have the right credential?" I started asking, "Is there something happening here that I don't understand yet?" Because the truth is, information matters, but context matters too. A few months later, I saw Marcus again. It wasn't some dramatic movie moment. There was no crowd, no cameras, no applause. I was walking through the engineering hallway during a routine security check when I saw him coming toward me carrying that same old backpack, the same backpack that had made me suspicious that morning. He looked exactly the same. No expensive suit, no assistant following him around, no attitude, just Marcus. He recognized me immediately and smiled. "Still stopping people at the gate?" he asked. I laughed and said, "Absolutely. Just a little better at knowing when to ask questions." He nodded and smiled. "That's probably the right balance." Then he kept walking. That was it. A 30-second conversation. But somehow, It meant more to me than any award or compliment could have, because Marcus had every reason to be angry with me. He had every reason to remind me that I almost kept him away from one of the biggest moments of his career. But he didn't carry that anger. He understood something I didn't understand at the time. He understood that I wasn't trying to disrespect him. I was trying to protect something I was responsible for protecting. The difference was that I had forgotten there was a person behind the badge, and he reminded me. Looking back now, I think about how many times we do the same thing in everyday life. We see someone standing in front of us, and we decide we know their story before they ever speak. We see a tired worker and assume they're lazy. We see someone asking for help and assume they're making excuses. We see someone who doesn't look the way we expect and assume they don't belong. But people are complicated. Everyone is carrying something we can't see. Marcus was carrying the pressure of an entire mission. I was carrying the pressure of protecting a restricted area. Two people with completely different responsibilities stood on opposite sides of a gate, and for a few minutes, neither of us could see the other person's perspective. The launch itself became one of the most incredible things I had ever witnessed. Watching that rocket rise into the sky, knowing that the person standing next to me had spent years helping create that moment, was something I will never forget. The crowd cheered. Cameras captured the flames and smoke. Everyone celebrated the success. But for me, the most important moment wasn't when the rocket left the ground. It was the quiet moment before that, when an ordinary-looking man stood outside a gate and showed me more patience than I had shown him. Because sometimes the biggest lessons don't come from dramatic failures. Sometimes they come from small moments where we realize we were looking at someone completely wrong. So now I want to leave you with a question. If you were Marcus, standing there with 18 minutes left before launch, would you have forgiven someone who stopped you from entering because they were following the rules? Would you have seen that person as an obstacle? Or would you have understood they were simply trying to do their job with the information they had? And if you were the person at the gate, would you have made the same choice I did? Or would you have trusted the person standing in front of you a little sooner? There are no easy answers, because both sides were trying to do what they believed was right. Sometimes the hardest conflicts aren't between good people and bad people. Sometimes they happen when two good intentions collide. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Would you have forgiven Marcus? Would you have forgiven yourself if you were me? Share your perspective, because these are the moments that reveal who we really are. And if this story reminded you to look twice before judging someone, share it with someone who might need that reminder today, because you never truly know who is standing in front of you. And sometimes the person you almost turn away is the person who has been carrying the weight of everything behind that door.